Ryan Reynolds has made hundreds of millions of dollars, not from his acting, but from selling gin and cell phones. Drake and Justin Bieber, they've also built global empires. But to me, the real interesting story isn't just about how they made their money, it's where they live and how they structure their businesses internationally. Because here at Blueprint, we help Canadians navigate moves like residency changes and tax strategies when heading abroad. So it got me curious about how do our biggest celebrities handle this? So I did some research and what I uncovered was pretty insightful, and I'll walk you through it in this video. I'll save the richest Canadian celebrity for last though, because I was kind of surprised to find out who it was. I bet that you won't guess it right. Alright, first up is Drake, Mr. Drizzy Six God himself. So Drake's net worth is an estimated 250 million US dollars. And beyond his music career, he's co-founded OVO Sound, turned OVO Clothing into a global brand through Nike and Jordan collabs. And he also co-launched Virginia Black Whiskey. His tours are massive. The Aubrey and the Three Migos tour grossed around $100 million US, and he earns roughly an estimated $50 million a year from streaming alone. Then there's his Toronto mansion, the Embassy, which reportedly cost around $100 million Canadian to design and build. And that highly suggests that his roots remain firmly in Canada. And that's where the tax implications come in. Drake is still based in Toronto, likely making him a Canadian tax resident. Because unless you cut ties with Canada and spend a specific amount of days outside of the country, plus file a formal departure return, Canada will tax him on his worldwide income. That means his streaming royalties, his US touring profits, his OVO business earnings, and brand deals could all potentially flow through the Canadian tax system. And the lesson is, if you remain a Canadian tax resident, the CRA has its claws in everything. So for Drake, no matter how global the brand, the income could still flow back into Canada's tax net. And I was actually really surprised at how he was able to bounce back fairly well from his recent devastating rap beef with Kendrick Lamar. But if the CRA were to ever come after Drake, that's a battle that might be even tougher to win. Now let's look at Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds isn't just Deadpool. He's built a serious business empire that I was pretty surprised to learn about. His net worth is an estimated 350 million US dollars. His biggest wins were a stake in Aviation Gin, which was sold for around 600 million US dollars, and about a 25% stake of Mint Mobile, which T-Mobile bought for $1.35 billion. And that one deal alone likely made him more money than all of his acting combined. But here's an important detail. Reynolds is a dual citizen of Canada and the US, and he lives in New York. That likely makes him a US tax resident. So when those massive exits happened, it wasn't the CRA cashing in, it was the IRS. If he had stayed a Canadian resident, Ottawa would not have taxing rights on those deals. Instead, by being US based, he likely saved himself tens, maybe even hundreds of millions in taxes. I know it's because we see this firsthand at Blueprint. The US is one of the most common destinations for Canadians moving abroad, and residency and tax planning is often the difference between keeping your wealth or handing over far too much to the CRA. Leaving Canada without a plan can cost you big, and I've seen people pay thousands more than they needed to. So if you need to avoid that, download our free guide on the 7 CRA tax traps to avoid when leaving Canada. The link is in the description. Now for a name you might not have heard of in a while, which is Shania Twain. Now Shania Twain's net worth is an estimated $100 million US. She became the queen of country pop in the 1990s, with Come On Over selling more than 40 million copies worldwide, which is to date still the best-selling country album ever. I'm the farthest thing from a country fan, and even I can name a couple of her songs and recite a couple of her lyrics. There was one about Brad Pitt, something like that.
Okay, so you're Brad Pitt.
Even decades later, Twain earns millions from touring, Las Vegas residencies, and royalties from her back catalog. But what's just as interesting to me as how she made her money is where she chose to live. Since the 1990s, Twain has been based in Switzerland, a far cry from her hometown of Timmins, Ontario. The move started as a personal one. She married her producer, Robert Lang, and they settled there for privacy and family life. Even after their divorce, she stayed in Switzerland, later marrying Frederic Thibaud, a Swiss businessman. Twain has often said she loves the quiet, natural beauty and distance from the paparazzi culture of North America. Switzerland is also home to the beautiful Alps, but the country is also famous for its favorable tax regime. Here's the crazy thing about Switzerland. Wealthy foreign residents can often negotiate a lump sum annual tax payment instead of being taxed on their worldwide income. For someone like Twain with steady global royalties and performance income, that could make a huge difference. It's also common for wealthy residents in Switzerland to hold earnings through trusts or holding companies, giving them predictability on taxes and a way to protect their global royalties for future generations. Twain's long residency there shows how lifestyle and tax planning can go hand in hand. The lesson with Twain is that while some Canadians head to the US for tax reasons, Twain shows why Europe can be just as appealing. So by living in Switzerland, she can combine things like lifestyle, privacy, and a tax system that preserves her long-term wealth. And here's the thing, you don't need to be a famous celebrity like Shania Twain to benefit from this. Because the world's becoming so connected and people are working online so much more, here at Blueprint, we're seeing a huge wave of people looking to leave the country for a more favorable tax regime. We have a team of planners and CPAs here who specialize in helping Canadians restructure their businesses and finances before moving abroad. So if you want to avoid handing over more to the CRA than you should, or possibly could, book a call with us today. And as we like to say here, build the life you want with the right blueprint. All right, let's talk about Justin Bieber, who has a net worth of around 200 million of an estimation. He's perhaps the most famous person on this list. Now, Bieber first rose to fame through YouTube, teen pop hits, global tours, and endorsements, all of which built the foundation of his wealth. But the biggest payday came in 2023, when he sold his entire music catalog for about $200 million. That deal effectively turned decades of future royalties into an upfront lump sum. And it's something that a lot of artists have been doing lately. For example, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Justin Timberlake, and legendary groups like Pink Floyd. Now, here's where it gets tricky though. Royalties are taxed differently depending on where you live. Countries like Ireland and the Netherlands have long been popular for their favorable IP and royalty regimes, while in Canada and the US, they tend to take a much bigger bite. So while Bieber spent most of his time in Los Angeles and applied for US citizenship back in 2018, he's likely formally severed his tax ties with Canada, which means the CRA won't be able to touch his catalog sales or ongoing royalties. They'll fall under the US jurisdiction instead. So the lesson is for global earners, it's not just about making money, it's about how you make that money and how different countries might potentially tax it. That could affect your residency planning strategy, as we've seen that with our clients as well. Now let's talk about Céline Dion, who is the richest Canadian celebrity with a fortune of roughly almost $600 million, built on decades of global stardom. Her Las Vegas residency alone grossed over $1.4 billion, and her perfume line has sold more than 30 million bottles worldwide. Add in royalties and real estate, and she's easily one of the most successful Canadian entertainers of all time. Celine, though, she's lived in Vegas for decades, which makes her likely a US tax resident. By basing herself there, she avoids Canada's worldwide tax net and instead benefits from the US rules. And Nevada specifically doesn't levy personal income tax at all on the state level. At her level of ultra wealth, most of her earnings likely flow through corporations, licensing entities, and trusts, which are structures designed to protect wealth across generations. And note the common theme here, for high net worth people, residency is super crucial. By living in the US, Celine has likely kept millions of dollars in a tax regime that's a bit more favorable than Canada. Now I want to talk about how business structures layer on top, because residency is the first big move, but the ultra wealthy and high net worth people don't stop there. They layer business structures on top to protect and manage their fortunes. Many use holding companies in places perhaps outside of where they live to pool income, separate risk, and streamline taxes. They also use IP and licensing entities. Music catalogs, film rights, and branding are often held in separate companies, so royalties and fees flow through businesses instead of directly to the individual. That provides further flexibility and strategies available. The sequence definitely matters though. Residency usually comes first, then the structures. Because if you don't figure out your residency first, the wrong country might tax everything, and it opens you up to a lot of can of worms perhaps, like perhaps some double taxation if you don't figure out everything correctly. But these structures and layers, they aren't just for ultra wealthy celebrities. Regular Canadians are starting to use simpler versions of these, incorporating a business, setting up a holding company, moving overseas, or planning ahead before selling. The structures might be smaller, but the principles are the same. And here at Blueprint, we help Canadians plan smarter moves abroad. If you want to be international business people, just like these celebrities. So visit our website to learn more about our services, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And here's another video I think you'll find helpful on the screen here, so go ahead and check it out now.